Well, good morning. How did you sleep? Good. Good. Now let's jump right in, shall we? Oh, my hair's doing like a Trumpian thing up there. I don't like that. Okay. Well, if you bain't ashamed of yourself, ye ought to be, pronounced Sally Lou emphatically as he dismissed his late prodigy through the back of the old stables and new garage. Us haven't done no harm to they, nor they done so no harm to we, protested Toller in a wheedling voice. Oh, he's still around, I guess. They were wondrous fine rum you given I, Mr. Lou. Oh, okay. Mr. Lou is... Toller's the... landlord? So many characters. I'll figure it out later. Mr. Lou, and if the lords... Whilst I'll pay the good deed back to ye come Christmas. Good night, Mr. Lou. Don't ye trouble to come no further. 'Tis a wild night for wind, looks so, but no token o' rain. I never likes these windy nights, Mr. Lou. They disturbs a person's mind. Yes, I knows me vey. Thanks ye kindly, God den to ye. Oh, okay, so that was the guy who came to see him. Mr. Lou is the landlord then. I think Finn Toller, also known as Codfin, just left. That was him speaking right then. Okay, that's cleared up. But when Sally Lou had gone back into the house, Mr. Toller made no hurried departure from the scene. Okay, I guess he hasn't left yet. He had long been practicing in Glastonbury certain patient, quiet, humble little methods of burglary. Of burglary so unassuming, so unpretentious, so easily satisfied that he had only once been caught at it, and since it was Bloody Johnny who caught him, eating uncooked sausage in his larder one November night, Codfin escaped even on that occasion with an eccentric reprimand. He now set himself to survey the back premises of St. Michael's Inn. He had long been anxious to find out exactly how the land lay in this establishment, and tonight he felt in very good spirits, having found out all he wanted, and at the same time, by a stroke of what in his own mind he regarded as pure personal superiority, reduced the mayor's foreman, and how he had done it he himself hardly knew, to a position of nervous subordination. He now planted himself under the protective of a new plum tree and grew against the old stable roof, and proceeded with uplifted beard to contemplate pensive the rear of the house. It must not be supposed that all the excited outpourings of human feeling that were whirling off on that west wind from so many dreaming heads, not to mention the two watchers at the open windows, were without their effect upon the nervous organization of the watery-eyed Mr. Toller. Had Sally Lou, or any other boon companion, inquired of him how he felt just then, Codfin would have doubtless replied, I never have liked these here windy nights. These here nights be turble hummy and drummy to me poor head. So hummy and drummy. As his weak eyes slowly swept over the ramshackle roofs and walls and chimneys before him, Toller's figure suddenly stiffened like a nocturnal animal conscious of danger. He became aware that one of the back windows of the main structure of the house was wide open, and that a human face was intently scrutinizing him, and not only scrutinizing him, but making signals to attract his attention. Wonder who it could be. Now, Mr. Toller, who had no scruple about using iron bars, and who had not the slightest fear of Mr. Shepherd, the old Glastonbury policeman, had from his childhood been awed into humble respect by the personality of Mad Bet. Ah, Mad Bet lives there, I forgot. He recognized now that there was nothing for it but that he must do this creature's bidding. He recognized, in fact, with the same instinctive knowledge, which Red had shown in his own case, that when in the presence of Mad Bet, he was in the presence of a nature born to dominate him. The woman was beckoning to him to climb up upon the stable roof and come to her window, an exploit which, for a person with any agility at all, was not a very difficult task. Mr. Toller accordingly made an obeisance with his head and a sort of salaam with his hands, such as Sinbad the sailor might have made in the presence of some grandmother of the Dijon, and set himself to climb. The wind was his chief trouble in this ascent, for the plum tree afforded him a ladder in the beginning, and once on the roof, as far as the actual climbing went, all was easy. But the wind made it difficult for the man to keep his balance. Made it very difficult for him to keep his balance. And very difficult for him to advance. He crawled forward upon his knees as best he could, but many times he was forced to lie prone on his stomach and remain absolutely still while the wind gusts whirled over him. What did Codfin think about during these moments, when he lay on the old cold slate tiles, in considerable peril of being toppled over and rolled down? To translate his thoughts into ordinary speech would cause their tang, their salt, their fine edge to be lost. But the drift of them was doubtless something like this. I'll be glad when Mad Bet lets me go. Mad Bet's got a message for me. Mad Bet's message is so some man she's taken with. I wouldn't mind some would if Mad Bet were taken with I. A woman be a woman. And when a woman's do smile at I, it do wrinkle up her face all soft and sweet, even if she be as ugly as sin. Such in rough, clumsy shorthand were some of Codfin's thoughts as he advanced slowly over the stable roof, lying flat when the gusts were worst, and crawling forward when they subsided. According to the wise, if somewhat tragic philosophy of Dr. Fell, the thoughts of the scum beetle from the Beckery stews was just as important in the total sum of things that night of the 10th of December, don't forget, as the dreams of Parson Decker or of the mayor himself. But it must be remembered, too, that according to Dr. Fell's philosophy, there's a deep importance, perhaps only a little less deep, in the feelings of a bewildered flea that Mr. Toller had carried away in his vest with him from his Beckery lodging. 'Twas sweet as rum and sugar to make that cockney sod take notice. Such might be a rough translation of yet another of Mr. Toller's thoughts, as he cowered in the wind under the racing clouds and tore his fingernails in the interstices in the slate tile. Those old slate tiles, as St. Michael's stable roof, came from the same port of South Wales as did this great wind, and neither they nor it seemed prepared to lend themselves easily to the proceedings of Codfin, thus struggling to obey the commands of Mad Bet. But he reached her window at last, and to his dismay found that she intended to descend to the ground in his company. Ugh. Finn Toller was not the man to shirk, but it must be confessed that if there had been any trace of tipsiness left in him, this command of the madwoman's, and it was given with the calm certainty of it being obeyed, would have made him deadly sober. The woman was warmly dressed and warmly shawled for the adventure when he finally reached her. That was one good thing. Another good thing was that her bonnet was tied with very strong tight strings under her chin. He could never have got her down in the wind, though he probably would have tried if she hadn't herself, with the supernatural cunning of the insane, told him exactly what to do. She told him exactly where he could find a ladder, and she told him how he could fix the end of the ladder in the projecting leaden rain pipe and lay it flat along the roof, thus affording a support for her knees in the wind and, when they finally reached the gutter, an easy way of getting down. It took so long to make all these moves, especially when he had the woman up upon the roof with him, that by the time he had got the ladder safe down from the leaden gutter and had it firmly fixed in the earth for her final descent, it was about 3 o'clock. "Here be a master sprite, here be," he thought to himself as he looked up at the wind-blown shawl and flapping bonnet huddled at the edge of the water-spout. Though where he had picked up the phrase "master's sprite," he could not for the life of him have remembered. She made him take the ladder back, when she was once on the ground, to the place where he had found it. Then, for the first time, she told him what she wanted him to do. An hour later, but still a long way from the approach of the winter's dawn, Finnthaler found himself seated inside St. Michael's Tower on the top of Glastonbury Tor, facing Mad Bet. Mr. Gaird's London architect had lately been making a few necessary repairs in the interior of the structure, and it was only for this reason that these two had been able to enter. It would not have been totally dark within the stone fortress of Matt Decker's God had not Betsy, who had made during the long half hour with her liberator, who had made... I'm going to start this whole sentence again because I think it's one of those long ones and we should really get it. It would not have been totally dark within the stone fortress of Mad Decker's God had not Betsy, who had made, during the long half hour when her liberator was fighting the wind on that stable roof, the cunning preparations of a crazy one with a fixed idea, brought with her 2 of 3 candle ends, extracted from candlesticks, left by chance in her place of temporary captivity. Finnthaler produced matches from his pocket and proceeded to light one of these candle ends, setting it up, by the help of his own grease, upon a piece of boarding. It says its own grease, but I like his own grease better, so I'm going to keep it that way. The flickering little flame soon illuminated, but there were not living eyes except their own to envisage the scene. Not only Bet's old-fashioned bonnet and quilted shawl, but the straggly beard, freckled face, and watery eyes of the derelict who sat opposite her, and who now filled the blackened stub of a clay pipe and set himself to smoke as he leaned his back against the eastern wall of the square stone refuge. The howling and shrieking of the wind, as these two sat there, made about their ears a deafening tumult, so that it was necessary for them to raise their voices to an unnatural pitch if they were to make their meaning audible. So innocently heathen was Finnthaler that when Bet shouted at him, "Archangel's walls be strong against thy devils," he had the notion under his low-colored poll that Bet was referring to her familiar spirit by some particular pet name. But Bet was quite right. Gwynabnud's power of the air were surely abroad in full force that night, and Michael's great wings needed to be strong indeed to ward off them from Glastonbury, these rushing hosts. "Why don't Mad Gerd build up Archangel's church," shouted the woman, "instead of dipping folks' bodies in thick mold well?" Mad Bet had put on an unanswerable conundrum this time before her rescuer. Matt Decker would have altogether entered into the spirit of this question. Over and over again had he remarked to Sam, "There can't be more than a dozen real Christians in this place, my boy, or instead of these fantastical pageants, I'd be celebrating Mass up there in a great new church." But Finnthaler puffed away at his clay pipe in silence. His awe in the presence of his companion was so great that he had actually done what he had never in his life done before, asked a woman's permission to light this pipe of his. And Mad Pet's permission had been given in true hieratic fashion. Hieratic. But it was a different thing when she talked to him of rebuilding churches to St. Michael. A patient, though not a sulky silence, fell on him then. Finnthaler took off his cap and leaned back his head against the stone wall. You couldn't see the stars at the top of the great funnel in which they sat, because of certain crossbeams which the mayor's architect had put across that dark, hollow space. that's the end of Glastonbury for today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.